First thing is, for those of you that looked at my my talk abstract, you're probably wondering why the second half of it was all Lorem ipsum, and that's because the conference had a minimum character limit on the talk description, and I didn't feel like filling it out, and so I told Jim, I go, I'm not changing it. He goes, okay, I'm not changing it. So it just stayed on the website. Okay, so LiveView Native, we've been talking about it for quite some time. I've given 2 keynotes on it, and it's still not released. But this morning, technically night for me, I released 0.3 release candidate 1. And so this is now the version that I'm letting out of the cage and saying people can finally start using, and we're going to be showing that today. And I'll be going over how it gets set up, running taking a basic SwiftUI application, converting it and building it in LiveView Native, and then showing some of the Apple's ecosystem libraries and how we've wrapped them and integrating them into LiveView Native. Questions around Jetpack, the Android framework, I'm sure a lot of people will have. I'll answer that right now, is that it's under very active development. I was going to include it in this slide deck, in this presentation, as it's very, very close to being caught up with SwiftUI, but we ran into some bugs that I just didn't feel like having to work around during the presentation. All the next steps we'll get into after this. So what we're going to see right now is just a video, because compilation eats up a lot of time during presentations, and for those of you that are going to start diving into for the first time native application development, that XKCD comic of waiting for the compiler to finish is going to become second nature to you. Okay, so first thing is we're just going to be adding a few libraries. And we're going to start with just the LiveView Native lib. And the generators for getting all the code necessary into your application are going to help step you through exactly what you need in configuring your application. There's quite a bit of configuration, and I'll explain why. We're adding the SwiftUI library style sheet, which is our style sheet implementation, and then liveform. Liveform, real quick, there is no concept of a form in SwiftUI. I know there's a form view, a form struct, but unlike the web, where we can just serialize all the child inputs of the form and then send this off the server, on native, you can't do that. You have to selectively decide within the application code what you want to pull from, and then you decide if you want to serialize it or do whatever you want with it. When we're doing server-side application development, we need that concept still. And so SwiftUI, Jetpack, these libraries are only meant to cover just the surface area of the upstream UI framework. So we try not to go beyond what that framework is. So liveform is a native form implementation with that same behavior as you have on the web, but meant for SwiftUI, meant for Jetpack, hopefully meant for One UI 3 if we can get there. And, excuse me, that's why it's a separate library. Notice that's RC2, because 20 minutes after I released it, I saw a bug. All right, and next we're going to be running the command mix lvn setup. This kicks off a whole bunch of other mix tasks, but very first thing, it says, oh, it's not configured properly. We have to actually tell Phoenix what LiveView Native plugins are available. So this first part is really just about copy-paste. We're going to take this right here, and we're going to add it to our config. We're not using Jetpack, so we're just going to remove it for now. Then we run the setup again. It's going to basically put a ton of files into your project, which we'll go over in a minute, all these files that's creating for the Xcode project. But then it's also going to have some color-coded things that you should be adding to particular files. So in yellow is the file to add to, red or teal is going to tell you whether it's required or optional, and then the green is something that needs to be in there to satisfy that particular requirement. But the config sections on certain areas may not be highlighted because you may already have that configuration there, so you have to add it to it already. For those that are unaware, configs don't compose, they overwrite. So you have to make sure that if you have a prior config of the same name, that you're not overwriting it. Here we're adding, we have a separate template compiler from Heeks. We have Neeks for native. So we have to add that to our live reload watcher. Here we are adding SwiftUI, the format, to our router because we are treating the platforms themselves as formats. So SwiftUI is a format, Jetpack is a format, WinUI 3 will be a format. And we want to ensure that we are routing this properly. So to that end, we are also declaring our own layout, our own route layout. We have our own version of Live Reloader that we're adding to the endpoint. Here is, so our style sheet implementation is inspired by Tailwind. It's not yet as deep as Tailwind, but we tried to lean into existing patterns as much as possible. So similar to Tailwind patterns here, we are scanning files for just whole names, and then we run this through our style sheet compiler in order to get a smaller version of the final style sheet. So we have class names that then get matched against what is present in templates, and at the end is what we get. And finally, here is, we can add some development options to our style sheet. We can annotate it, we can pre-print it, so if we need to inspect it later, we can check that out. So here we're going through the native file, which is going to be the analog to the web file. It's going to be used in all of your modules for setting up and importing all the convenience functions. The styles file gets generated automatically. This is your style sheet in that sigil here, and a bunch of information in the file on how to work with it or write some escape hatches if you need to. And then our layouts. So in all cases, you'll notice that you have here layouts.swiftui.ex, and it would be the same for Jetpack, layouts.jetpack.ex, and then the layouts directory, layouts SwiftUI. We're trying to isolate and keep things as separate as possible. We're not final on the directory layout, but the more we lean into isolation, the better it is. And where this is gonna feel a little bit more awkward is that we've introduced this isolation to the live views as well, whereas on Phoenix controllers, you have now render components. We've had it for quite some time. We've introduced the concept of render components to live views too. This came about through a PR. We did a 0.2 release. We were hoping that this was going to be like, okay, now we can start talking about this one. That was around December. We had discussed with Jose and Chris, I think maybe during the summer, the idea that we wanted to have this isolation. And Jose had the concept of render with, which allows us in the on-mount callbacks for LiveView to declare an alternative function to call when rendering the template. And I think this got merged maybe in December, and at that point I was like, all right, hit the reset button. We got to rewrite this thing. And so I spent the past few months rewriting it and really realigning the framework around what I think is hopefully now its final form, because it's leaning as heavily into Phoenix conventions as possible. We try to make it feel as familiar as possible so it doesn't feel like here's something separate that's kind of using Phoenix. So here it's showing off how the layouts are using our existing native module, but it all seems and looks like the existing Phoenix ones that get generated. We have our own core components file for SwiftUI. We'll have one specifically for Jetpack, and we've wrapped a lot of the form elements in some of the common components that you'd normally be using. What we are hoping to reach as a goal is that we have set out that the components, so while the actual view elements are going to differ wildly between HTML, SwiftUI, Jetpack, and whatever, the function components are where we can actually align on API. So we are leaning into and making sure that our components that we're creating are responding to the exact same API. So the idea is that your event handling, all the data that you're setting up in your live views should not have to change. The only thing that you're going to need to do in most cases in order to get a native application to render is adding templates. So if you have an existing live view application and that data is already being set up through the live view just fine, then you just need to add a SwiftUI template in this case in order to take advantage of it. We still have some work to do on making sure that our events are emitting the proper data shapes that we'd expect from the web. There's some deviation there. The way we're treating it is that if we're like a Phoenix change event, right? If this is coming across the wire represented in a different way than it would from an analogous element from the web, that's considered a bug. Maybe working, but we want to make sure that we're using the exact same event handler. We shouldn't have deviations in order to handle the exact same thing because the data is coming in two different ways. So as you start using this framework, if you say, oh, I have to do this differently for SwiftUI because it's a little bit different in this case, report it as a bug and we'll treat it as such. So between 0.3 and 0.4 is where we're going to be hopefully doing a lot more alignment on that. As we're finding, it's a very long road because there is a lot of stuff in the Apple ecosystem to be wrapping. Okay, all right, I will now request the assistance of my human microphone stand. Okay, so that was the setup. Let's now come back to this application. Okay, so this is the application that we just generated. What's going on? Okay, mix. I think there was some sort of latency there. Oh, yeah. How big should I go, Miguel? Uh-oh.
I can read that.
Yeah, I can read that. So can I. Red. I gotta migrate the database. Wait. Okay. Okay, all right. So in this case here, we have the application up and running. We have the home live, which is just our regular, I'm gonna replace this. Just our regular example live view. Make sure that's actually routing correctly. And I'm gonna just run this command here. All right, so what this did was, you can see what it created. Created the live view for SwiftUI and the corresponding template. Right now they live alongside one another, and I'll show another application in a minute where I have quite a few, and even I'm looking at this like, oh, that's a lot of files in one directory, so we may have to rethink that at some point. But right now, this is what the LiveView Native SwiftUI render component looks like. And we have corresponding templates up in this directory. So if I were to just do text, and then let's get this running. Watch, it's not going to work. I swear to God, having to battle Xcode on a daily basis is just mind-numbing. I look forward to everyone else enjoying my pain. Hold on, let me just reset the whole thing because I make sure it didn't crash out on me. Okay, we're gonna do some debugging. Sorry about this. Awesome. All right, you know what? I'm just gonna go to the version that's actually working. Right here. Okay. Yeah, I must have forgotten one step on the other application. All right, so I'm gonna just pull away from this for a moment so I can actually show what I wanted to show in the other app real quick. And that's going to be here, here. Okay, so we're going to go into this, and we're just going to do this here. Okay. So we're going to, oh, come on. I think it failed on this. Okay, so we're now back to the blank. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take this very basic application and we're going to build it pretty quickly. We're going to skip all this because this is like writing Swift code, and we're just going directly to the view. And we're going to go right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to bring it right into my editor. I'm going to bring this over, and I'll have this side by side so you all can see what's happening. And we're just going to go up here, get this commented out, and fix this again. I think it didn't like that reopening of the comment thing, so I'll have to mark that as a bug. And we'll bring this down here. Come on. There we go. Okay. All right, so now we're just going to create a new VStack. VStack. And inside it, we're going to basically reproduce this view hierarchy. We're going to do a ZStack. And then we have an image, it looks like. And then outside the ZStack, oh, sorry, the image is inside the ZStack, and then we have a rounded rectangle. And then we have two texts. And this says, welcome to here, and then, sorry, it's a little bit difficult typing in this angle right here. This is description text, that's awesome. Okay, so we have this. It looks like nothing right now because the rounded rectangle is just taking up the whole space. So what we see here is attached to these view elements are called modifiers. This is how you style applications in SwiftUI and do a bunch of other things too. But they hang off of the actual structs as function calls. And we apply them through our class and style sheet system. So in this case, we see the ZStack has a padding modifier attached to it at the end. So all we're going to do is class equals padding. Now, as we go, live reload is going to be notified that the application has updated, the application state's updated, and it's going to reload itself. For those of you that have done SwiftUI development before, you're probably thinking, oh, wow, that's better than having to stop the simulator and restart it. The Xcode's preview usually acts as fast as LiveView, but it breaks quite often. Okay, so now we're going to just go down here and continue to add the corresponding modifier. So for rounded rectangle, in this case here, rounded rectangle has an attribute. So we can use that as an attribute here. Corner radius equals 30. Save that. See the rounded corners come up. We're going to do class equals frame width 150, height 150, close, shrinks down. We're going to add foreground style dot white. That doesn't show much because I just got rid of the color. That's supposed to be tint, not white. Sorry, I jumped on the wrong line. Now we go over to image. This first one, system name. So SwiftUI comes with this whole like icon vector thing. You can see it on, I think it's called system icons or something. I don't know. There's like a whole catalog that's available on Mac OS if you want to check it out. Was it? Yeah, SF symbols. Yeah, that's what it is. System name, and we'll just copy this. Oh yeah, sorry. combining things. Now we have little people on there. And now we're just going to add some sizing stuff. So class equals font system size 70, and then fix this. System, yeah. Another big. And then we're going to make sure, sorry, I was about to say we're going to make sure they're white. That's not a good thing to say. All right, I'm making sure that they look like what is on the Apple documentation. All right, and then we just go and do on the text too. So class equals font dot title. Now it's big. Font weight, semi-bold. Padding top. And this next one is, just font description, title 2. Okay, and this should look identical now to what we have here. So if you're saying to yourself while watching this, like, oh, that looks like what we were told not to do like 15 years ago, is write our styles in line, and that's correct. This is kind of like a stepping stone towards what I hope is going to be a more complex and useful styling system. Right now, what we've done is that we actually get all of the kind of hacked our way through Swift to get all of, I shouldn't say we, Carson. This is Carson's fault. He extracted and did code gen for all the modifiers that are available to a compiled Swift UI application, and then we code gen all of the all this into what's called a utility class for our style sheet. So when you generate your application, if you go into the styles directory, you won't be able to do what I was just doing until you uncomment this line right here. So that comes commented out by default. You have to uncomment this, and you'll see at import. And so yeah, this is supposed to look more like Tailwind or CSS imports here. And yeah, we are using an import name, which is already used by Elixir, but it's an it's a module attribute, which felt okay in this case. And here's some examples of just like compounded rules that we've written. And you can reference these by any of the existing class names. And so these, the utility styles get imported, and then all the ones in my style sheet take precedence. So I can overwrite any pre-existing ones. But by default, the utility styles will allow us to access all of the original rules and modifiers from Swift UI. Okay, so now that we have that, we're gonna go and look at the more completed version of this. So if we go all the way down here, we can see, oh, this is, turning out to be not too much of a complex application, but it's looking pretty nice. Rather than walk through building all that, I have it already pre-built. And so we're just gonna come down to here, and I believe that it's on this one here. Let's close this. Ooh, I think I have a closing thing here. Okay, so what this is it's called the it's like a tab view of, and Swift UI allows us to actually, now we can drag this over, and we have something that resembles what is here. I think the one thing we don't have is this background. I forgot to style that in. Okay, so it's pretty easy to take pre-existing Swift UI examples. In fact, Figma, for those that are using that, allows you to actually build UI, and then it will give you Swift UI like view source. What I'm hoping that we'll be able to get to in the next few months is actually doing a code gen, taking pre-existing Swift UI views and then just being able to rewrite them for LiveView Native. So you can just be able to drop this right in along with the utility classes, and then hopefully we'll come up with a more complex styling system at some point in the future, so you won't need to do all these one-to-one parity of rules. But this is intended to be kind of like the base that we can always fall back to in LiveView Native. Okay, so now let's go back to the other application. All right. So now we're going to show off some stuff that some other libraries that we can pull in. The first is going to be LiveForm. And if we go over into the form markup here, we'll see what looks like some familiar form components. So we have an input component. We can reference the corresponding SwiftUI input with the type here. And then we set everything up as we normally would in Phoenix. And then we can just access it. So these are all linking back to assigned variables and rendering out properly. So everything's happening server side and then coming back to the client. So we go and change the date and then it's going to show up right here. If we go back here and we can look at video, we wrapped a vkit. I don't think we have everything wrapped yet, but here I took, I think someone put out like just a list of some video sources. So I don't know where this is streaming from, but we have a video player going, and I have a little back button here to get rid of the page. Big Buck Bunny, which is a pretty, I don't know if it's well known, but it's like, I think the Blender team put it together, so we can show off the video. Let's come back here, and we can go to map. So if I want to say Lisbon, bring me over to Lisbon. We can go, okay, so the chart is going to look bad because I am bad at design, if you can't tell from this right here. But we wrap Swift charts as well. Swift charts is a pretty deep like charting library built for Swift UI. And I ran into a bug where it looks like crap, but it was supposed to look like a stock ticker, and I just couldn't get it to look right. And our Swift UI developer was done for the day. I didn't want to bug him after hours, but it's at least showing that we can chart properly, and the corresponding markup is pretty simple here. We're just using the for iterator, going over data, and that's probably why it looks like crap, because I made it too simple. And if we look at the, we can go back and look at like the video one is pretty easy to build out. We just have a video player right here, and everything should be one-to-one. So if you go through the SwiftUI documentation and you say, oh, here are attributes, here are option setting, these should exist in LiveView Native, and that's our goal. So again, anytime you start playing with it and you start to see, oh, this is slightly off from what it says in the documentation, that is a bug. Please report it and tell us about it. And finally, the map one, we wrap, so a map kit gets exposed as a map element here, and we just set everything up, and it works really, really well. Okay, so I think I'm past time. I'm past time. I think I'll leave it at that. I don't know if we have time for questions or not.
So yeah. So no time for questions this time. The questions are in Whova. So I would like to invite you there to answer them in writing.
All right.
So yeah, this was great. Let's give a warm round of applause.